There we go. So setting expectations with the group is really key. It's become a really big thing in our leadership assessments. So, what we're kind of looking for there is for our folks to not deliver their plan as such, but deliver a plan that adapts to the group and flexes to their wants and needs, to support them to make sure that they have the outing they want, essentially. So I guess the questions we're looking at here is how do we do this with our team and how do we set a group vision? And if hopefully not everyone's feeling too shy, I kind of thought folks might have some things that they want to chip in at this stage, or I can keep talking. John looks like he's unmuting, so that's good.
Yeah, I was just thinking almost immediately, I've got a group I'll be taking out on Sunday, and there's already one person in the group of our last paddle didn't want to do one section of the river. So we've been in a bit of communication already just to go, look, these are a couple of sort of other places we could go. What do you fancy? And to let them also be very much part of where the group can go.
Yeah, that's it. I guess the as much early communication as possible is really important. And I guess sometimes that can be a challenge when we're working in a club because we've probably got a day job and family and all the other things we need to do in life. So that can be a wee bit challenging. So um I think, some clubs will be quite open and honest and say, look, for trips, we'll kind of put out an indicative plan maybe 5 days in advance, once we see a forecast that might vaguely resemble reality. And then they start to kind of work out from there. Yeah. Anyone else got any thoughts or things you do in your club?
I guess there's something that we're thinking about very much at the moment with various people preparing for different types of assessment.
Hmm.
And sometimes we want to offer something because we want to do something specific and have people to try it out with, as
Of course.
opposed to we want to design a paddle that you want. What would your ideal day be? And it's a bit like Maria said last week that she'd been trying to get some practice leading people through some rock hopping, and it was very clear up front. But then when people turned up, they didn't necessarily want that. So there's the sort of setting expectations with the group beforehand about what it is that's on offer can be quite useful particularly when it's not just about tell us what you'd like us to do. We actually want to do something and have some participants.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I guess being clear with where the trip is pitched at in terms of like challenge and what type of thing we're likely to experience, and that can often be difficult if we're working with people who are newer to the sport, can't it? Because well, they just don't know what they don't know, and you could tell them all the words, but it doesn't necessarily create the right images in their head. So yeah, makes sense. Anyone got any other thoughts?
Yeah, I guess just picking up a wee bit on what Julia said there, it can be quite easy to hang yourself as a leader if you're
Hmm.
saying, right, we're going out on a trip on Saturday and we'll do some rock hopping. We all know that the conditions are very seldom exactly what we want. So sometimes pitching a wee bit more vaguely um, makes it a bit easier for the leader on the day. And that's not to say that you're not setting an expectation. The expectation is we'll use the conditions we've got. And if there's anything people want to do in these conditions, we'll try and make it happen.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think some of the clubs, including I think Nesky, categorize their trips, don't they? So you've got a grade A trip, a grade B trip, and a grade C trip, and that kind of sets the level of challenge expected on the trip without boxing yourself into a venue, so that you can work with the conditions.
And I mean, I think for sea paddling, I'd encourage any club to work with a grading system. It you know it means that the leaders know where to pitch what they're doing, and the people signing up, um, know what sort of standard they're signing up for. When we actually have standards of competence, say if you want to go on a grade A trip, we expect you to have the following capability. If you want to go on a grade B trip, wants to have additional capability. And that seems to work fairly well.
Good. That makes sense. There's a lot of variables that we need to manage, so being able to be quite fluid, but at the same time quite specific about the level of challenge or distance we're likely to paddle is always a good thing, because that at least allows people to make an informed choice. How do we get that kind of group vision then? We've kind of chatted about that kind of expectations. Has anyone got a golden nugget to help do that?
Possibly pre-event questions, what people want to get out of the event. Going on what was talked about last week, it shouldn't be leader centric. It should be definitely about the group deciding what they want to do with their day. Whether it's a commercial event or if it's a club based event, they are the ones that are spending their time and sometimes money to have a nice day out, and you're just facilitating what they wish to do. So pre-event questionnaires, questions, get an idea of what they've done, what they've not done, and what they'd like to do.
Yep.
There's also, apart from the pre-planning and the setting expectations, there's the reconfirming that when you get there on the day, when you take a look at it, and having a kind of shared agreement that everybody feels that that is still what they want to do, and are they feeling uncomfortable about anything or comfortable about everything to get going.
Yeah, that's a fair point, Julia. You want to make sure that the kind of the vision that we had stands up once we see the sea or we see the river level or whatever it happens to be, and make sure that there's a kind of match there. And I guess people's kind of vision of what they're after can develop and change as well, can't it? So just making sure folks are still where they were. Any more for any more?
I guess it's not just the conditions that you're looking at, it's also how people are feeling, whether people have had a decent enough sleep, whether they've got everything that they need, what they've left behind, have you got spares, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. A lot of those things can influence our feelings in the moment, can't they? Which initially we thought it would be good, but yeah, things might have happened. Definitely seen a few torn neck seals, for example. If somebody pulls a dry suit on, that can very quickly change what they're thinking for the day, as an example. That has quite a dramatic effect on people's motivations. So yeah, all of these things. I think essentially what we've really been saying around these two questions is it's about that communication, isn't it? And keeping it as open, getting as much detail from our group as possible, to kind of make sure that we're setting off in the right direction, and giving them as much detail of the plan that we can give without trying to box ourselves into a difficult place. But this all takes time, doesn't it? So ultimately, if we are leading in club environments, then we're probably going to be restricted with this. To be fair, in a commercial setting as well, when it's summer and it's 7 days a week and unrelenting, then we're probably in a similar place that communication is hard, especially if we're in places with low connectivity. So I think ultimately we just try and do our best with these things. And if we can, like I will say to my clients that, I'll look at conditions, and usually it's about 3 days out that I'll give the actual plan. So, they know that in advance. Because yeah, I kind of want to leave things as late as possible just to make the best of the conditions that we get. So just a wee example. Right, folks, we've got a wee breakout room task, and this is to kind of discuss how people take information in. So somebody hopefully has a wee note of what that'll be, because you won't see this slide when you're in the breakout room, but you can maybe take a screenshot if you want, or scribble it down while I set the breakout rooms up. It's a relatively well, I say that relatively small task. You could be there all day, to be fair. But I'm going to give you I'm going to give you 5 minutes, because I think the feeding back will take longer than anything. So if we could have someone in each breakout room who is ready to feed back to the rest of the team, that would be really useful. All make sense? Good. See you soon, folks. Welcome back, folks. No one jumped back early, so you must have been deep in discussion, which is good. Hopefully we have a spokesperson from each room. Room one, do you guys know who you were and who your spokesperson is?
Becky.
I think that we were room one, so unless anyone else wants to claim the mantle, I agreed I would report back from our group.
Thanks,
So we
Becky.
talked about how we started by talking about the things that interfere with how you take information in. So sort of being aware that when we're communicating with people, they're probably thinking about lots of other things or trying to do lots of other things at the same time. And related to that, we spoke about how people might only take in the kind of top line of information, even if you've provided a lot of information, or they might take it in but not retain it particularly well. We also spoke about how trepidation or anxiety can reduce the amount of information that people are taking in because their attention is occupied elsewhere, and that it can be useful to have an opportunity to check in if you're not feeling at your best, to make it clear to people that there will be an opportunity to do that, can take the edge off it and allow people to be listening more fully. We also talked a bit about different preferences. So for some people, written instructions can be intimidating, whereas for others, verbal information can be a bit of an overwhelm, and then they're focusing on the first set of instructions and want something to be able to come back to. We talked about examples of how people might not want to be interrupted if they've got a sort of methodical way of preparing. So by this time, we were thinking a lot about what you're doing on the day at a paddle. And we talked about the opportunity to shift the responsibility back to participants, for example, by letting people know when we'll be leaving and asking them to ensure that they've arrived in enough time to get themselves ready and can do things to their preferences. And then our final bit was on how biases and prior experience or your understanding of the description that somebody else has written might influence the way you take in the information.
Brilliant. Lots of good things in there. Thanks, Becky. And team. Team two, room two. Do we have a...
Yeah, we were room two. We kind of had three main areas, I suppose, that we focused on. So we spoke about messages, using messages, and sort of the pros and cons of that, and the sort of the new system of Spond, but sort of touched on how using apps might not be a good way for everyone, and so people could miss out on taking in the important parts of the information, and maybe not take it in at all if they don't, can't use the technology all that well. We also talked about how some people might not be able to read or respond if they've got something like dyslexia, etc. We then also spoke about the learning styles of visual, audio, and kinesthetic, and how for some people that matters a lot in terms of how they take the information in. So trying to sort of channel the communication into some sort of topic, and in that sense. And then we spoke about videos as well, and condensing all the information into one video that somebody can watch. So then they're doing something, they're listening to it, and it's a visual, and it's not just it's condensed into a few minutes as opposed to a big spiel of information.
Brilliant. Thanks, Emma. Some complimentary stuff there and a few bits that came up in room one, so that's really good. Awesome. And room three.
Joe threw the ball in my direction before I could throw it back, so I'm spokesman for this one. Yeah, there's a few things from groups 1 and 2, so I won't repeat that. But we talked about getting, we would generally want to put as much information out there before the trip as possible, whether that's the emails, the Spond, or whatever. And there's a danger, there's an assumption if we put the information out, people have got it and understand it. and we can trip ourselves up there. So just as a side there, we mentioned both at wind scales. People say, oh yeah, probably force 4 at the weekend will be fine. Bottom end of force 4 is a whole lot different from the top end of force 4. So we have a duty as the leaders to provide the interpretation and to help the understanding on the information we're putting out, and to give people the opportunity to question us and to ask us. So generally, the information is probably not going to be face to face when it goes out initially. On the day, we've got the opportunity to basically say, everyone get the information. Did they understand it? If there's anything you didn't, feel free to ask the question, or catch me while I'm packing my boat if it's something you don't want to ask in front of everybody else. And that idea of helping the interpretation of the information, because we're always going to put the information out there. It's just, how do we find out if people have taken it in? And you have to ask the question.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I always put out pre-course information for my courses, and then like on Saturday when I sat down with the 6 students, university students that is, I said, so who looked at that? And I was like, no is a valid answer, and they all went, no. I was like, okay, cool. I know where I'm starting from then.
University students for you.
They don't even go out drinking like they used to, so I don't know what their excuse is. But yeah, it's important, and I put that out there. I say, no is a valid answer, because I want them not to feel pressure to go, yes, I read it, and yes, I understand it, and I want them just to go, no, and I'm right, that's fine, and at least I know where I'm going from, and what I'm working with, and that can be really useful. And I think, yeah, there was lots of good stuff that we've kind of mentioned in there. I'm gonna share the slides again, because these kind of tie into some of the stuff we've just been mentioning, which is awesome. So yeah, that was the one we were on. This was kind of mentioned. How do people take in information? Obviously, there's VAK, which we'll have heard if we've kind of gone down any of the coaching stuff, and that'll have come up. So this can be really, as I think was it room 2 mentioned, this can be really important for some of our people. They maybe are a very visual person, or a very audio person, or very kinesthetic. Now it's difficult to put pre-course information out in a kinesthetic way, but the other two are maybe a little bit easier to achieve, and we might need to put some text around it and things as well. And if I can, if I've got if I've done a similar thing before and I've got a little bit of video, sharing something like that that can really paint 1,000 words, as they say. So I find that can be really useful. We kind of mentioned there that we're putting the pre-course information out in advance, and that would be kind of in our slow time, and that people would be taking that in and soaking it in when they've got the time and they can make the space. And then that kind of discussion on the beach, or when we're out in the boats, comes into that real time. And I guess that just depends, how much they absorb of that will depend on where they are in their comfort zone, and are they in their stretch place, or are they in somewhere where they're very comfortable and they can absorb the world around them. If they're quite stressed at that point and the blinkers are on, then they're very much going to have a focused view of the world and may struggle to take in that kind of real-time information. So we just need to manage that as best as possible. And I guess an example I would use there is, I will, if there's something that somebody needs to know and they're going to need it just around the corner, but just around the corner is going to be a stressful place, then I'm going to preempt them and tell them in advance. And that could be whether I'm in the river environment and I'm sitting in an eddy, and I know this next move just round the corner is really important. It could be the same on the sea, that I'm just on one side of the headland and I need to tell them what to do when we get round that headland, but I can't tell them once we're round there, because all of a sudden the blinkers are on and their real-time focus is kind of blown, because they just don't have that mental capacity anymore because of the environment. Obviously, some people will take information in a group, and we'll normally share our kind of group brief as a oneer. But some people might struggle with that, so we maybe need to reiterate things individually. if they're really important. But also, I guess we will get to know our club paddlers very well because we paddle with them regularly, and hopefully get to know our clients well as well. So we know when that could be a bigger thing, and when it's less of a thing. Um, how do we communicate? Well, I guess I'm sure we've all seen these numbers before, to be honest, because I've seen them many, many times. Um, Body language and tone of voice carry a lot. Now that says voice, but I would say that's just the kind of actual detail of what's said. That could be text in advance, and um, I guess that's why it can be quite challenging to paint that picture in the club email that we send out in advance, because actually that's only 7% of the communication. There's none of the tone or the body language that goes with that. So it can be sometimes difficult for people to interpret. I'm sure we've all been in situations where we've either written something, say an email, they're classic, and someone has actually taken something different from that email than what was intended. Um, yeah, that 7% is often the only bit we send in advance, which can make this quite challenging. It's worth remembering that different people will thrive in different environments, for example. So if we've got people who are very introverted, being in that social setting that we often are as paddlers might be quite draining for them. Actually, they need a bit of time to recharge and just get back to themselves just by being themselves. Whereas our extroverts, they're actually going to thrive in that kind of normal paddling environment because we very often are around like-minded people. And I guess this is more important when we're on maybe longer trips. Hopefully on a day trip, then our introvert has, enough social stimulation through the day. Then they can go home and kind of recharge and then come out again. But, if we're doing maybe a weekend club trip or a week away or, anything like that, then it's maybe something we need to think about just how we build that space. And sometimes, some companies I work with, they will say, oh, we all share tents because it's easier, we need less tents. But actually, our introvert, they might just want their own tent because that means they've got their own brain space to just lie there and go, oh, and make sense of what happened that day. So just trying not to impose too much on folks and keeping it as open as flexible as possible. Yeah, helps most. Any thoughts, questions on that kind of stuff?
I've got a wee one.
Yeah, go for it.
We're just making me think there about ways to sort of create opportunities to recharge or get space. Is there any sort of thinking around the opposite about how you make sure you, if you're not sort of extroverted yourself, like being good at providing extra opportunities for stimulation or, sort of, yeah, the other side of the
Yeah,
coin?
that's a good question, Becky. Yeah, no, that's a good question. I guess I always take for granted a wee bit that our extroverts are kind of looked after in group paddle, but no, they're probably some will need more than others. Anyone got any thoughts? I'm just pondering at the moment if I've worked this one out in the past. Part of it comes down to the space you create, and I'm thinking again on that longer term journey that, maybe our extroverts, rather than us all disappearing to our individual tents at the end of the day's paddling, maybe we want that communal space to come together to cook and to come together and eat and then socialize. And I've definitely had trips where we've had a tent for eating, or we've maybe had a tarp that's where we all go and eat, and that type of thing would be important. It's obviously difficult if we're out on an absolutely minging expedition, and we all kind of want to just go back to our tents and not come out until this is over, the weather that is. But I think if we can build in some social space, that can really help, and that if we've got that, it allows our introverts to get involved if they want to. our extroverts will definitely be there, but our introverts can disappear off to their own space if they want to, or come and join that kind of more social area. Anyone got any other thoughts?
I
I'm
suppose
definitely not
it's
the only
having
one.
kind of simple ways of just checking in and not being overbearing, but just checking in with people and leaving them to do what they want to do, but knowing that they can come out if they want.
Yeah, kind of leaving that door open to folks if they want it. Yeah, absolutely. It's a difficult one though. Who
Yeah,
was
so I
that?
was saying, there's probably a lot of benefits from that when you get back on the water the next day. We're probably going to have a much more cohesive group.
Absolutely. Yeah, if our introvert has been stuck in a social situation all evening and hasn't had that recharge time, then we're definitely going to see that on day 2, 3, and 4, aren't we? That'll pose some challenges. John, you're off mute. I don't know if that's because you want to speak. No, just off mute by mistake. Cool. Just wanted to check. Right. The next thing we've got here is pre-trip communication ideas. Now, it feels like we've chatted around this a bit already, but I don't know if anyone's got anything else they want to throw into the mix. I've got a couple of bits, if not. Stunned silence. Okay, I guess things that I've seen done are the obviously what Donald mentioned in terms of grading our trips. I've seen some clubs using video footage. So saying this was the last time we were on this section of water. This is how it looked now. That always comes with that caveat of it may be harder or it may be easier depending on the conditions. But I think especially when we're at that beginner level and people just don't know what they don't know, if we can show them some visual of what it might look like, that's going to help them make some informed decisions. And hopefully, if they make some informed decisions, it saves us from having those difficult conversations of going, I'm not sure you're quite ready for that yet. The more we can kind of put out there, the better. I know I do a wee bit of work at Glenmore Lodge, and certainly with our courses we run, the marketing team are very careful at getting the right images that fit the trip and the level of challenge expected to find on the trip. And that's to try and just make sure people are in the right place. You know, they've booked onto the improver or the intermediate when that's the one they should be on, other instead of like vice versa. And I think they're starting to use a bit of video around that as well. When we're out, we're kind of capturing bits on the water and just sharing that as much as possible with the marketing team so that they can put that out. And I definitely see that with some of the club. Some of the clubs have got good posts when they put it out, and they'll say, you know, here's a couple of pictures of the more challenging sections, for example. That might be one way of doing it. It's just kind of getting that balance. Any other thoughts, folks? No.
I think we've spent a lot of time looking at the descriptions of the different workshops for Schwupps and the language used and things that convey the same message but sound less threatening, if you like, or yeah, to try and convey the progressive and support and not use the words that are the most blatant. It's gonna be scary kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, we don't want to scare people off, but we just want to try and be realistic, don't we? You know, it's a really difficult balance because if it is what we said before, that written email in advance, and it's just that 7% of communication going through, it's really difficult. Um, and yeah, I know I was on a webinar the other week with it was quite a few commercial providers, and some of them, you know, will spend time on the phone with each individual client before they come along, to try and just ensure they're booking onto the right thing and they're delivering quite a bespoke product, so they have the time to do that. And then some of us who are not in that place, yeah, end up having to put more things in text, and it just makes it more challenging, doesn't it? But yeah. Good. Um, Another breakout room, folks. So this one is more about when we're on the water and how do we communicate on the water. And I don't just, I guess the default folks might go to there is signals, or we need to use signals, which is definitely a thing that we need to use when we're out on the water. But this is more about how we convey a message, when do we convey it, and that type of thing. So hopefully that makes a wee bit of sense. Um, just gonna, if we could have someone who's gonna come back and share the message, that would be brilliant. I think it's potentially the same breakout rooms looking at it. I don't know if Zoom does that or if it gives you different ones. So you might have the same folks, you might have the different ones, I'm afraid. Not 100% sure. But you'll have 5 minutes and then we'll come back in and do a bit more sharing. Okay, folks. See you soon. You got a breakout room, Jill? You're on mute just now. All right. Oh, I've realized you dropped out and dropped back in, so
It
you're not
dropped out,
assigned.
yes.
Right, I've got it.
Thanks. Thank you.
No worries. welcome back, folks. Let's dive straight into it. Room three this time. Let's go backwards. Room three. Do you want to share with us what your where your conversation went?
Okay, well, having tried to foist it onto other people, I'm the one who's on it. And this time I wasn't there at the beginning, but I don't think I missed so much of it. But I thought we had a suggestion that the communication should be succinct, timely, and appropriate. And we had quite a lot of discussion about what that meant and how, in particularly the timely being that it was in anticipation, so the communication was made before it was needed, and that the ways of communicating were also anticipated. So whereas there could be some verbal communication, there should also then be a setup. Before you couldn't use verbal communication, there should be something set up in place, and whether that signals and things to let people know. We also talked about the sort of non-verbal communication of just leadership position, and so actually positioning in a way that kept people away from things that we didn't want them to be involved with, or that directed them to where we did want them to be involved and stuff. And so in some ways the non-verbal thing and the recognition of when non-verbal communication was going to be necessary, and how it would back up the verbal communication that had been done in advance, that kind of thing. And I think that was about it.
Some nods there, Jill, so you must have covered it well. Thank you. Room two.
Yeah, that was us. So John sort of started us off with talking about sort of establishing things before you even get on the water. Obviously things like river signals, and then we started talking about sort of body language while you're on the water. You know, if you have a sort of, if you as a leader look happy, relaxed, like you're having a good time, like the group will adopt that. But then also, if there's necessity arises where you need to take a more direct approach, potentially a more serious manner, and see like, I want you to go here, they can also pick up on that as well. And we talked about sort of reading the group's body language as well. John was saying, you know, if it takes people more than 20 seconds to decide if they want to do a rapid, then it might be quite a good thing to go over to them and actually have a talk and see if that's what they want to do. And there was something else, but I seem to have forgotten it. So apologies if I've missed anybody's points out.
Anyone from room two want to chip in that last point?
I know it was mentioned about sort of holistic approaches being a bit authoritative, and also suggesting opportunities so that people can have to try and help people understand how to communicate what they're feeling or thinking, as opposed to trying to put it all on them to communicate. So sort of asking those leading questions almost. We also spoke about non-verbal methods like using a whistle, using a hand signal, so that you don't always have to be physically looking at them, and also managing better a starburst situation or needing to get people into a safe position.
Good.
Thanks, Emma.
Brilliant. Some nice teamwork there from room two. Room one, anything to add on what we've kind of covered already?
Yeah, it's tough going last, isn't it? So there was a lot of overlap. I guess we talked about having a plan at the outset of some elements of it in terms of the how and the what, and having that kind of demeanor that people know that you're approachable and you're going to be supportive of them at the outset, and that maybe if you have the opportunity to have an assistant at the front and one at the back, or designate people to be in those positions, at least at the outset, and maybe change it around, is useful. And being able to move around the group so that you can talk to them one-on-one see if there's any concerns, and just give them the nod that they're doing great. Lots of non-verbal stuff that you can see from them, or you can give them non-verbal encouragement and maybe buddy them up if they're feeling somewhat anxious, but you don't want to lose sight of what's going on with the rest of the group, but you bring somebody in to support them a bit, give them a bit closer support and have communication working that way. Thinking about what questions to ask. And definitely devoting cognitive space as you're doing it, the leading, to make sure you are continually thinking about those things rather than, oh, there's something interesting coming up here. And so, yeah, timely, but also continually having time to look around the group.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, some really good stuff there. I think it's a good point about mentioning building in the brain space, and sometimes we might actually have preempted some of it as well, even in the pre-planning. We chatted a lot about kind of decision making in advance last week, and I guess some of this might fall into that, where we plan some of our communications a wee bit, thinking about, well, when I get to this spot, I'm definitely going to want to tell them about X, Y, and Z because they're going to need to know that, and given the
Gave
space
a
for
little
you
bit
to
of
think
time to
about.
one other thing actually, which was if you have had past experience of people breaking off from the group, or you're aware that could happen, then talking to them explicitly about the decision they're making, having come to join a group paddle, and the consequences that may be having. Like, it might take you longer to get there if you need to sort something out, and if they're doing it because they're experienced, you kind of want them to help with the group when they're on a group paddle. If they're doing it because they're feeling uncomfortable, then that's something that can quickly turn into not being able to manage the group if you don't pull it back in tight.
Yeah, definitely. That can have a big impact. Yeah, I see that more often in club paddles. I don't know why, but yeah, definitely a challenge. Definitely a challenge. Let me just share the slides again. To be honest, I'm not gonna lie, I'm using Adam's slides again tonight. That's 2 weeks in a row almost. And he's not come up with anything that you haven't. What you guys have put in there has been, well, you've more than covered what's kind of in there. I think the body language, and I think it was Julia mentioned, the cues are really important. Sometimes just giving a positive nod or a wee thumbs up to someone can make a huge difference. I don't know if that quite kind of hand signals, kind of body language, but those little things, those little positive reinforcements can often have a huge impact on folks, without having to be too overt about it. This doesn't always need to be us going over to them and chatting with them. It can be even more subtle than that, depending where we are and depending how it's going. Now, this is an interesting one. How do we encourage socialization in a group? Now, this is set up as a breakout room. I'm happy to do that, or happy to have a group discussion if people are keen to chip in. But if it's easier to chat in smaller groups, which it kind of sometimes is, then we can do that. So if people start chatting, we'll go for it. And if not, I'll put you in the breakout rooms because that might be easier to chat with 4 other people rather than 13 other people. Stunned silence. Okay.
Well, I was already thinking, Lyle, of initially it already depends on, see, within a club, we probably know most in the group, so that already helps.
Yeah.
And then it's then including those who maybe it's their first time paddle out, even to before getting on the water, to introduce them to the group, what they would like to get from the group, and to get a bit of an idea of where they're sort of at. And also, I suppose, other things they're interested in. Do they take place in other sports? That might suddenly sort of bounce up other people who have similar interests, and then they might buddy up going down the river.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think it's important when we've got those newbie paddlers, if it's a trip we do regularly, like weekly, it's important we get them engaged and involved and making that effort to do that. Definitely, John. I've definitely seen that in club paddles in the past where the newbie kind of, just because they don't know anyone, seems a little bit off to the side. So I'll usually try and go off and paddle next to them and have a wee chat and get them kind of involved. And yeah, as you say, if you can draw some parallels with the group, that can always help. Any
Get
others?
people buddying up to do a task or a game as an opportunity to make it easier to find someone to get chatting with.
Yeah, no, definitely. Buddying up, I guess one of the wee challenges maybe that is that you're forcing them to chat with that one person, which can be sometimes a problem, but not always. But yeah, yeah. Any others?
Well, I
Oh,
think,
Anya's keen.
yeah, well, I think it's important to not try to force it. I think maybe it's more important to create the safe space so that people can, for those who kind of want to be socialized, it's easy for them to be more open. And I think, for me, one of the things I love about sea kayaking is that I can kind of be in my own meditative state, and I'm still part of a group. That's socialization as well, without the chatting. And I notice, as long as you kind of create a safe place, a lot of the people who start talking to each other, it's kind of happened by itself because people feel that they are in a safe environment.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Mm.
Good
I think
knowledge
also
of coffee shops helps.
It's the second week in a row coffee shops has come up. There's a theme here.
got to support the local industry.
This is true. This is true. That is always my argument for going to get tea and cake.
I was
Ice
going to
cream can
suggest that,
sometimes work too, but we have to be a bit more selective in the timing of that.
Indeed, indeed.
but
Donald?
leading by example, I think works quite well. So I'd always make a point of talking individually to every person in the group before we go in the water, even if it's just acknowledging their presence. And then once you're on the water, hopefully you're going in the water into reasonably easy conditions, then start talking to a person in the group. Everyone else will pick up the cue.
Yep, absolutely. No, that sounds good. Any more for any more?
I think possibly if you're organized, if it's a group of people who may not have met each other before that, on the beach of what brought you to the event or something like that, would maybe start sort of breaking the ice down a wee bit so that people can sort of, I'll go and speak to Johnny because he's done this before or he's not done this before. So people are a bit more aware of where people have come from. But generally, we're also the fact that we decided to come and do kayaking, we're all sort of maybe like-minded in that we might do other outdoor activities, and that might lead into better discussions on the water or coffee time.
Yeah, that's true. Does often bring about folks who have very similar interests. Good. That's what we've got here, and that kind of shared vision and planning that we chatted about earlier, so that we are kind of on the same journey together. The fact that we're sharing in something will help folk socialize, because they're on a common goal, as it were. Games with aims, this will work with some groups and not with others, but some of those games can be to encourage that socialization, and that could go from as simply as a group who don't know each other, and I'm thinking a kind of kids group where I might get them to throw a ball to someone, and before they throw it, they've got to shout the person's name. So that's kind of getting them reinforcing those kind of connections. Although that could be something much more complicated as well. But with some groups, that won't work. You got to read the room, don't you, with these things? And that's a kind of group dependent one. People mentioned already being self-aware and aware of others' needs and learning needs and kind of giving them that space. And I guess I didn't do this deliberately. I'd love to say I had actually, now I think about it. We started with breakout rooms in this, And I think if I'd asked you all to chat in a bigger group at the beginning, we'd have got more of a stunned silence. Whereas this one, because we'd all kind of chatted a wee bit, we were a bit more warmed up to it, then folks were building into that bigger group and more keen to chat in this wider group, which is really nice. So that can work similarly on the water, that we might start off with some smaller groups initially, and then building so that we're coming together and sharing in that way. So yes. Any other thoughts there? No. We're running a little early tonight, which is unlike last week. This is the last slide, which is, are there any kind of questions or thoughts that this is kind of raised that we kind of want to share, or just air with the group to see if anyone's got any bright ideas to help us solve some of our problems? I'll stop the share so you can all see each other a wee bit easier as well. Don't all shout at once. No.
I guess it is some of the strategies that people find useful when things are at danger of breaking down group-wise before they do, or trying to keep the group being useful and productive and supportive.
And are you thinking on like a day paddle, Julia, or is that kind
It
of...
could be anything. I mean, it struck me that what Maria was talking about last week at the end about you've said you want to go on a rock hopping trip, who wants to come along, this is the objective, and you feel you have this buy-in and you can check that beforehand and so on. But she was finding herself with a group, some of whom wanted to do rock hopping and some of whom just were sitting having a chat and not remotely interested in coming in and taking part. And I guess a simple one that we sometimes have is that somebody's with a group but goes off, and it's just preemptive stuff, if you like, and early
Yeah.
warnings.
I guess that person that's going off might be that kind of introvert who needs that wee bit of space to themselves.
Could be.
It might be like Anya mentioned that she kind of likes that meditative space, maybe without folks chatting away in the background at times. So I guess it's how we can support that. And maybe it's about having that early conversation just to find out, what is driving the person to that. Is it that they just want a little bit of space, or is it actually something they're not getting from the group, or a challenge that comes from the group that we kind of need to manage? I think anyone else got any thoughts there?
I guess my thought there is that if you can set parameters, it makes it an awful lot easier, and that applies to any work you're doing. Right from getting your beginner's club trip to a major expedition. Having a discussion on the water about whether you're going to do something or not do something, or whether it's time to turn back or not, it ain't the place to have it. So if you've agreed parameters at the start, if I use an expedition example, if you're doing a crossing, an open crossing, you might agree with the group, if there's a 4 in the forecast, I'm not doing it. And I've certainly done that in some of the big crossings in the past. And then, if you get an updated forecast, there's no discussion. You've agreed with the group, as a reason to come on that trip. These are the parameters we're working to. And you can do that if you're leading a group. If we go back to that rock hopping example, a few people want to do rock hopping. If it's safe to do so, we'll find the opportunities. If you're not one of these people, that's fine. Just sit off. We'll find something for you to do, around the corner. But again, just setting the expectations we talked at the beginning, with but also parameters while you're on the water. Having these discussions prior to what's happening is always going to make your life easier.
Yeah, that's true. Anyone else? Does that help, Julia?
Yeah, yes, and it's stuff that we've sort of thought about before. I guess there's an element of staying firm with people who don't want to do stuff. I totally get the meditative stuff, and if you can do it, but it seems a shame to have set. Yeah, when going back to the stuff about we have some people that would like to be doing particular things to prepare for something, and so in some sense you don't. I mean, okay, conditions, inappropriate conditions, and so on, all the other conditions there, but you kind of want people to be very much signed up to that's what the aim is, the shared aim, and go along with it rather than make it difficult to carry it out. Because there are other things that could make it difficult to carry it out. And that's part of it, but you don't really want your group participants to be one of those things in terms of their attitude rather than anything else, if you like.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to liken it to situations I've had, and I guess one I can think of is when I ask mock students to come along for an assessment, for example, and at the end of that, I am going to ask people to fall out of boats so that they can be rescued because I need to see my coaches or leaders, whatever it is I'm assessing, do those skills. And I guess I'm trying to think how I manage that. And I guess it is that putting it out there as early as possible that, this is what we need because of these parameters, sometimes there are parameters. And it coming back to, I think, where we were chatting about last week, that was about people who are practicing specific things to get ready for an assessment, for example. And that might be just being very clear and honest and say, look, this might not be the trip you want, but this is what we're looking to do. And I've definitely done that with training courses for coaches where I've had a few mock students come along and I'm like, look, this you're going to get something from this, I hope. But there might be times where we just have to stop and geek out on coaching for a bit because actually that's what I need to chat with my participants. And I know that might not be exactly what you're after today, but this is what we need to facilitate for these guys. And if you're keen to be a part of that, and support that, that would be brilliant. But I totally understand if that's not the day you're after. And I think that's how I've tackled things like that in the past. Yeah. Any more for any more? Any other thoughts, questions on kind of what we've chatted about this evening, folks? Um, if you do want to drop off, absolutely feel free. If there's anything you want to chat about in a smaller group and you just want to let some folks drop off first, then feel free to do that. But thanks for your time this evening, folks. And yeah, if you want to stay on, stay on. And if you want to depart, then enjoy the rest of your Tuesday evening.
Cheers, folks.
you.
Thanks, Lyle.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Lyle.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Lyle.
Right, bye now. Bye. Question for you, Lyle.